is the regular meeting of the Public Works Committee to the RTM. It is 8:03. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Thank you all for coming this evening. I hope the end of your summer's been great. Yeah.
Best part, kids went back to school.
And the warm weather arrived too.
Yeah.
I got to see the grandkids.
With no objection, I request that we accept the agenda as distributed. Are there any objections?
Second motion.
Okay, very good. Now, if there's no objections, we'll move on. I have no announcements. We're going to roll into, most of the announcements relate to items that are on our agenda, so unless there's something folks want to touch on. At the Rules Committee meeting a couple nights back, one of the items actually relatively alerted me to.
It's the description.
Came up, the descriptions of, actually I skipped that before we go any further. So let's go back and, had everyone have a chance to review the minutes
Yes.
from the last meeting? Were there any comments, questions, concerns? I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. I'll say approve.
Right.
Second?
Second, so who's really describing that?
That would be me.
He's on it, he brought his,
Who's the man?
all in favor?
Actually need a pen. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Any opposed, any?
Or adopting the minutes, accepting?
Unanimous, makes it easy for you there. So you got that one, Pat? Okay, very good, thank you. So at the Rules Committee meeting, one of the items that was brought up, welcome. One more on the attendance. Thanks for your note.
The
They came.
angry one or the?
Oh, no, that one, we won't share that one. Oh, we gonna share that? Okay. We'll put that under other business.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what category that comes under.
That one tree?
Oh, it's a doozy.
Stay tuned.
Yes. So Appendix B to the Town Code Rules of Procedure of the RTM Part 4. TGSNA undertook a pretty extensive review of that section. The idea there being to bring it more, make it more current, to clean up any inconsistencies certainly as it relates to practice in recent history. And I'm going to draw attention to a couple of areas. What they've asked is that TGSNA circulated a draft or a markup of that section. And they've asked the chairs to the various committees to get back with some initial feedback this week, which I'll be able to do, no problem. And then if the committees have further feedback, they respectfully request that we get back to them with those comments by September 27th. So we do not have another regular meeting before then, so we'll call a special meeting if we need to. But let me hit what the highlights that caught my attention are, and then I'm probably going to ask or suggest that if there's an interest, maybe one or two folks that have an interest and maybe experience on this section, kind of consolidate their thoughts for the committee for next meeting. The first thing that caught my eye was there's a section talking about the number of members from each district. They struck it, that being, this is on the Rules Committee, there being at least one from each district, each standing committee. That was struck. Curious. I believe the feedback in the room was that you've got representatives on rules from each district, and to the extent that there was ever a situation where, because of numbers and qualifications or whatever, it made sense not to have someone from every single district represented, that the parties in the room vote to do that. Every district is represented. Anyway, that's one item. Not supporting or opposing it, just stating it. And here's the part that I wasn't, a member may not be a member of more than 2 standing committees. This is subcommittees.
Aren't you in 3?
This is standing committees to the RTM, Public Works.
So those two being your functional committees, I'm in
Yeah.
rules if you had to.
Right, which is,
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
confused about,
Yeah.
Does rules count or does rules not count?
because that would qualify everybody who's on rules, right?
Yeah.
From No, because two would be the max.
Right, it says you
So
can't
it'd
have
be
more
rules
than two.
plus one.
I just can't imagine any time when you would be assigned to.
Two standing committees is what you, set aside rules.
Nobody's on two committees, are
No. No.
Okay,
Could you?
So
It's not trying to,
okay.
We'll come back to it, that's, so there's only 7 sections I sent Mark, but that one was interesting.
Mhm.
And perhaps I can get some research as to what the intent was there, the legislative history. So,
right.
The Federalist Papers.
Maybe they just.
there was a big markup, section F, G, and H, new inserts, relating to, the Rules Committee may periodically publish a listing of areas or entities that fall within the purview of each of the standing, committees. And it goes on to describe a little bit about that, that's the headline. And that we actually, they provided a list of areas of purview, for the district, for the different, committees. Next, section G was pursuant to the RTM's role as one of the town's budget-making authorities, each standing committee is responsible for reporting and monitoring all annual and long-range financial matters, including but not limited to annual budgets, capital and capital plans, town indebtedness, town-related funds, gifts, above established gift amount, set elsewhere in the code, etc. This, to me, felt like an expansion of what maybe some committees are doing or not doing. I know we do a fair amount of that, it's not requiring, but this seemed to me to be a more proactive monitoring of the budgeting and planning than maybe certainly what was spelled out. And so I note that one. Seems more like a sharing of responsibilities with F&B to a certain extent. And then the last one in this section that was added was standing committees are responsible for review of the list of areas and entities and to report changes to rules. Committee as to new items as they are established or no longer active. We're going to touch on that. I believe this committee last session undertook an effort to review that section. Is that what you forwarded to me?
There were several things that the Rules Committee actually sent to us.
Is that where it came from?
The matrix,
Yes, the matrix.
okay, with all the various relationships between all the various different parts of government and how the Public Works Committee would or would not interface with them, if you recall. And then the other one was just the description, per se, of this committee. And we put together our feedback on both of those.
That was last year.
That was last year, yeah.
Okay. Now, where am I up to? I can hand you all of this.
Yeah, I was just saying, it's a little bit hard for me to follow.
I'm gonna send this document out. I
Okay.
just handed it a couple days ago. And I think it came electronically yesterday.
I think per the rules, all you have to say is that we reviewed the,
And I will send you these expanded minutes with my comments. Okay, so don't, my initial comments on each topic are here. So I saved.
But the electronic version that came around did not have the markups and deletions, it only had the final text. So I'm just looking at it now, and I don't see what was cut, stricken out. All I see is the language of the letter, which is fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't give you the.
totally, no, I mean for the minutes, though. He doesn't have
Right,
to.
oh, right.
Yeah, I agree with.
You just have to say we went over it.
Yeah.
We talked about it.
Yeah.
Then there's another section added that all committees are responsible for abiding by state law, code requirements, applicable town charters, et cetera. That's not the reason I marked it. I marked it because it says all standing committees are responsible for monitoring and following all areas and entities as assigned to it by such standing committee and the listing prepared by rules committee. So that's a whole new insert. I'm not sure what it was. I thought it was just you'd be abiding by the rules and laws, applicable law, and then there's this last sentence at the end that seems to.
Repeat that last sentence.
I'll repeat the last. All standing committees are responsible for monitoring and following all areas and entities as assigned to such standing committee in the listing prepared by the rules committee, in addition to those entities and areas listed below. Now, the listed below are education, finance, and budget, so it's all the standing committees. So my takeaway on that is,
Yeah, what's that in English?
I think it's saying, responsible for the areas below, each standing
Frank
committee is
Kemp must have written
responsible. I think what it said, but I think what it's saying is each standing committee is responsible for the area assigned to that standing committee, and we're gonna touch on that in just a moment.
Plus.
And plus, anything the rule assigns to it.
Right, and anything else that comes up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As ruled.
As
Could have just said that.
Isn't that kind of how it is?
Yeah.
It sort of is, yeah. I think
It
it's
just wasn't
codified.
spelled out
Which is-
yet.
I guess it kind of is, but I would
It just
imagine.
took a long way to get there.
I mean, look, there's a core of this process, which is about clarifying the mission of each of the committees, which is, I think, a good and honorable and very necessary clarification. To the degree that you elaborate to such a degree, it just makes me feel like there are being landmines planted that are a place to catch, not this august servant, but say a future chair of Public Works, should he fail to deliver the responsibilities as described by the Rules Committee.
Uh-huh.
Right, and so I just sense that there are, I mean, it's great to have a codification, I just don't want this to be like here's the race you have to run as a committee chair or as a committee as a whole in order to
That's fair.
be on the good side of rules.
I had a somewhat similar takeaway.
Right. I mean,
We've said you will do this.
right.
Didn't you do it?
Is that a pain of death, or?
I don't know, there's no penalties.
Oh, okay, that's
Right, but you know, like, I mean, if in a future situation, if rule says, if a future, not to impugn the current rules committee, I'm sure they're, individually, collectively lovely people, but, you know, if there's a future rules committee that is in some way in conflict with one of the standing committees, this is the way the rules will exert power over the standing committees to,
Well, but
to
at the
assign
same
things to
time,
the standing committee that.
I understand your point, but Jack Davis went on like a little presentation about how this is supposed to give more independence and power to each standing committee.
Yeah.
Okay? So what you're describing and what Jack was saying are kind of
Yeah,
at
not-
odds with each
If
other.
I'm a little paranoid, guilty
You?
as charged,
Yeah.
no. But
Just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean
doesn't mean
something's
they're
not
not
okay.
getting But I
Everybody
reach,
said anything.
but, at the same time, to the extent that this, if I take that flip of the coin, right, then as long as we are operating within our purview, we should be the only ones operating on a particular topic. So if we think that something belongs to Public Works or public infrastructure, then we should be able to carve that out, and like, public health and safety shouldn't be horning in on that.
Well,
Well-
the matrix gives a lot of overlapping responsibilities.
Does
It's like there are some topics that are covered by 3 different groups. It's
Yeah.
like, and it's always and finance and budget.
Right.
Right.
So,
But that's,
so-
for better or worse, that's how it's been for a long time.
And for what it's worth, in my time on rules and my time in the RTM, while certain committees have certain purviews, I've always been of the understanding that any committee can look into, address, or weigh in on anything. Now, I've never tested that very heavily, but it's always been, the budget is a perfect example. Every committee is invited to comment on every resolution. So, we certainly can seek clarification. Right. This seems more directed at, giving the respective committees authority or responsibility, depending on the perspective, on certain areas, not exclusivity, but accountability or responsibility. But anyway,
Well, I think overall, to the extent that this clarifies the mission of the committee and raises the bar on performance and clarifies what it's supposed to be doing, I think that's great.
and that's a great segue to the second to last section, which is the description of public works. Okay, this committee worked on that last section, you can piggyback on that effort. There's a draft here, I clarified at the meeting, the draft here does not incorporate any of the work that we've done. That was served through the RTM or not.
That's good.
But, when we did that work? Well, it's available, because we're gonna weigh in on this particular section, so we can piggyback on that effort, it's not wasted effort. And then the last, comment, at least it caught my eye, is the moderator may attend, the moderator may attend any meeting, which I knew that, or any executive session is the insert, held by any particular meeting. that was ambiguous, well, silent, previously.
Now, the words "any executive session"
It says or executive session, any meeting or executive session.
pertaining to a
For the
committee.
RTM.
Of the RTM.
Right. Oh, okay.
Implied.
Okay.
These are.
So that
this
does
is
not
governing the
include
RTM.
an executive session by the Board of Selectmen.
No, this is
Strictly
governing.
within the confines of the
If
RTM.
this committee had a
Unnecessary.
If we had
session,
executive
it's
session.
separate.
Yeah.
Executive session only takes place
Yeah.
within the context of the meeting, so it's unnecessary that.
Yeah, everything we've talked about tonight is embodied within the rule, committee, and standing committees. It doesn't apply outside of the RTM. So I will circulate this marked up version. But what I like, is there parties that would be interested in taking a look at this? I didn't think it fell underneath any of our existing kind of focus areas. But if there's folks who've worked on this, who are familiar with how we arrived at the description of public works, that would like to consolidate, revisit those thoughts and formalize them ahead of a special meeting. Or,
Something
Hey, oh,
well, first of all, does the committee think they would like to address, consolidate thoughts from the committee to respond by the end of September, basically?
all of those sound.
I definitely think we should respond to them.
Yeah.
There's no question in my mind about that. You know, how we go about doing that, it's certainly we should discuss. I know we put in time to come up with the description that we did, which you're saying they didn't adopt, so just from that perspective alone.
I didn't take it as rejecting it, I took it
Yeah.
as scribers didn't necessarily
Incorporated.
incorporate it for
Uh-huh.
no reason.
Okay. Because we had a bit of a
Yeah.
discussion about that last time.
We
Wait,
did
how do you know
last
they
session.
didn't incorporate?
I asked.
Oh.
No, I didn't do a compare, I simply asked. I
Okay.
was in the room, it was
Got
handed
it.
to me, and I said, hey, did you piggyback on the work that was done? Looked at each other, no, we did not.
Cool.
I took it as an oversight.
Yeah, it sounds like they just.
It happens,
They
it happens.
didn't know.
So, I mean, I think taking as a starting place, kind of the feedback that we gave last year, and I propose that we all, look at that explicitly if we have the time, and come back and just, and either in a separate, but I don't even think, it doesn't sound like, the sense of the committee president isn't that there are major controversial topics there. And so I would basically take forward what was done last year and submit and kind of use that as a starting point. And if any thoughts arrive kind of to all of us between now and the next time we talk about this, then we can put them on the table.
Well, could certainly do that. Would it make sense for me to read what this committee came up with?
I'm not using it.
Sure.
It's
This is
very
what we
short.
came up with last
Oh,
time.
okay. Can we
All
start?
right, so the revised
I think it's
definition.
short.
I'm like, if it's 10
Yeah.
pages, no.
No, it's pretty
Yeah.
short.
Okay.
Public Works, establishment, maintenance, and operation of town-owned and operated public works facilities, such as all buildings and infrastructure other than school buildings, park, recreational, or police facilities, water, sewerage, stormwater drainage, bridges, roads, sidewalks, etc., and all related matters of administration, personnel, operating budget, and capital expenditures. Sure feels like this captured part of where, on the budgeting forecasting side, that's captured elsewhere in this draft.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna compare that to what we did, because it sounds almost,
So the structure of what you read
Sounds right.
is, the structure of what Seth Morgan sent around is confusing in that there seems to be a little liaison section below that. If you skim down in that same document, I mean, I'm only going off what Seth sent around.
yep, so I'm in section 6, 7, further down.
Even in that same section, in that, is it 6B?
6B,
Yeah, part 6, section 2, part 6, section 3. Like what you just read is close to word for word what Seth sent around. But then there's an additional section that says, for each of the committees, what they will do, kind of add in furtherance of those responsibilities. So for Public Works, it says monitor and reporting on all town-owned or operated public works facilities other than school buildings, park and recreation.
yep.
Liaison with parking authority and sewer authority as well as other areas assigned.
Ah, okay, there you
So,
go.
right, so that is an additional.
That's the addition.
Liaison, again, repeat.
Liaison with the parking authority and sewer authority, as well as other areas assigned.
Would you liaise with?
So both those are legitimate.
Yeah.
The parking authority.
Again, I find the structure of this to be confusing, but the responsibilities that they're talking about are not outlandish.
No, those two ads are sort of in line with past practice. And the general description above that looks, although I'm not seeing it as word for word, in substance, it may be similar. So.
We're good.
Are we good? So.
I would just say for comparison, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
There's a section about town's government structure administration committee,
Yep.
which is enormously long. It's probably 4 times the length of what what any other committee has. So I don't know if that's just people on TGSNA were particularly proud of what they do, which they should be, or if they really had that much more greater scope of activity in TGSNA versus any of the other sections of town.
Yeah, no, it is long.
There's quite a lot of verbiage to use Rolf's favorite.
So if this committee's of the view that the definition prepared last session expanded to consider those last 2 items in the version the Rules Committee circulated, you can go back, would someone like to make, is there any thoughts on that? Just combining those 2? Adding what was drafted last year, and adding on to the end, liaise with the parking authority and the sewer authority as well as other areas assigned. That's the ad.
I moved.
Okay,
Just recording.
yes, do we have a second? Second.
Discussion we're missing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, are we missing anything?
My only thought is in the sewer department, not strictly speaking, but in the area of sewers, we have a relationship with Stanford. We, as a public works committee, have never had to have connection with Stanford. We always mediate that through Ed. Right? So I guess I'm not thinking it's anything we need to do.
I wouldn't think we would ever have the opportunity or responsibility
Right.
to liaise
With Stanford directly.
outside of a
Yeah.
town.
You know, liaison with the sewer commission, definitely.
Right. But then sewer
But
commission is the
then,
one to.
that's
Yeah.
really their purview.
There was discussion over the past year about the establishment of an empowered flood mitigation or flood and wastewater drainage commission. And there was debate, and kind of Hartford said, you guys should all do something like this. And some communities have chosen to put in place an empowered commission that is responsible for flood mitigation and management. Obviously, it's an important topic here. And so our town has not decided to put in place this executive body that would kind of have purview over that area. But if one were to be created, I think that the definition of public works should include oversight on a flood mitigation type entity. And so that's a general comment, it's not a specific.
Oversight or liaise?
It'd be liaise, in the
Liaise,
same way
yes.
in the same way that we do with sewer and other things.
You probably just add language there that's big enough, like, and any other committee that maybe.
And any
How
other
about that
commissions
falls
that-
under these?
Yeah.
What's it says, as well as any other area
Oh, it says that?
assigned?
Well, so there is, but I would go where you are. I would say that I would put that I would specifically enumerate that flood control committee within the meaning of the state statute in whatever way that we as a town decide to interact with that statute would be a responsibility.
So we'd be naming an unestablished entity versus here, the only ones that are listed are established entities.
Well, or if you don't put it in the entities section in the bottom, which is the liaison section, because you can't liaison with something that may or may not exist in the future.
That's right.
But you include it up above that in the section in terms of areas of responsibility would explicitly
We
include.
wrote stormwater drainage, we've got it already,
Flood
okay,
and
we've already got it covered.
mitigation.
Got it.
We've got it.
I would just like to add that I'm not so sure that it doesn't exist.
In fact, it does exist.
It does exist.
We designated one of
There
our-
is a stormwater authority in the town of Darien. It's under the auspices of the Environmental Protection Committee.
Right.
Or commission.
So then.
Now, how active they've been, that's another
But
matter. but-
Well, you have to go for, anytime you do a construction project, you have to go get a permit or a volunteer from them.
But the statute has all kinds of powers and capabilities that have not been pursued,
So,
to the extent of what's written in the statute.
so that would be putting in the liaison section,
That is.
the stormwater authority.
I bet you, I don't think there's a lot of people that even know
Right.
about that. It's just that.
It comes up in P and Z. That's the only reason I know about it, is it comes up in P and Z.
How recent is the statute?
It's a couple of years old.
It's a couple of years. old.
Actually, it was an augmentation to a piece of legislation that was issued quite some time ago. And what they did was they brought it back and then enhanced it more recently.
And gave it more power.
And gave it more power than what it had in the past. Okay, so there's some real teeth in there, but there's been no real, motivation to pursue anything about what's in there.
Well, we have a motion before us
Oh, okay.
to amend it. to
So
include
do
that
you think
sentence.
the wording covers, or?
I would add to the liaison section, so I would propose and I put forward to, an amendment to that in order to add the stormwater authority to the groups that we have a liaison responsibility for.
So let's see how this works. We've got a motion on it.
Technically, that's an
So we have
amendment.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
isn't that an amendment to the
Right.
That's what
motion?
we're- Yes, you,
Yeah,
so
that is the amendment.
you have an amendment to
To
the
the motion.
motion before us to
Yes.
add the stormwater authority. We think that's the name of it.
I can check that, if you want.
Well, we could correct it in the minutes if we
Okay.
have to. Just-
Yeah, which is today under the auspices of the EPC.
But we don't have to.
Okay, because there was talk at one time about making that separate.
Well, let's just stick with the body.
All right, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but just to keep, the more you put in there, the more chance.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so is that, that's a motion?
That's a
Yes.
motion.
Do we have a second to the amendment? Frank
Second
seconds.
seconded it. Let's give our
Okay.
clerk a
Any
moment.
discussion on the amendment to the motion?
So we're gonna make
So,
proposal to put it on, even though it is not yet formed?
no, it's,
What do you think it is
in
for?
existence.
I'm
In the town, but not in the town. It is in
Just
existence.
have to readjust the microphones. I'm so sorry.
no worries.
You want to spread them out, maybe?
Yeah.
Obviously, the EPC exists, but I'm not finding it. in my book.
So it would be in some,
Try stormwater authority.
it would be in some action of, I think, the board of selectmen designated EPC as the state.
Yeah, I think it's just the EPC. I don't think there is a stormwater.
The EPC is the
Yeah, I don't think they have specific.
It's not a separate.
It's just the EPC.
Well, now we have a second, we have an amendment.
Okay.
No, to the amendment to the resolution. Or the
Amendment to the motion.
To the motion, amendment to the motion.
To the description.
So if it doesn't exist,
Well, all right, I'll.
let's,
I'll-
perhaps we can go with it.
I wasn't prepared.
Yeah, where do we table it and address it in a special session?
I'm
We're
in-
kind of getting.
I'm in-
But I seem to be moving in that
We're moving in that
direction.
direction, we're not ready for prime time yet.
I think so, because also I'm going to go against it, because I think it's kind of covered already.
Yeah,
I
can you
think
read
it's
the
covered in
sentence?
concept.
Yeah.
Can you
with
read
the
the
storm.
sentence again?
Sure.
It might just be covered already.
Okay, so the sentence, I'll read the whole thing, it's only 2 sentences. Establishment, maintenance, and operation of the town-owned and operated public works facilities, such as all buildings and infrastructure other than schools and buildings, parks, recreation, police, water, sewerage, stormwater drainage, bridges, roads, sidewalks, etc., and all related matters of administration, personnel, operating budget, and capital. It's 1 sentence. So it is, in concept, it's covered, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the amendment, or the addition from rules, called out 2 specific authorities, which we do liaise with regularly. certainly parking authority, and sewer. So, are there other authorities that we might, or could, or should liaise with? Probably.
Great Island Commission.
The committee, advisory committee.
For now,
So where do we stop? How far do we go?
Well, wait, didn't it say something about others? It said those two.
Was it,
Can you read that?
As well as other
Exactly,
areas
which we do.
assigned.
Right, but
But those were never even assigned, I'm not sure. We liaise with them because we have to be informed.
Right.
Nothing's preventing
it's
this
good
committee from
governance, right,
liaising.
for us to do that.
Yeah,
Right.
There's nothing that prevents this committee from liaising. Another one that I used to liaise with, I'm sure other folks have, is what used to be known as recycling committee, that became the sustainability committee, and someone there was single stream committee or something like that. So,
I feel like it's covered.
I feel like it is too, because we're
I
how
mean,
far
we
down
should
this rabbit
list
hole. we
every
go.
single thing that we ever do, then it'll be as long as the other groups thing. and it's
There was
not
the PIA.
necessary.
It's not.
Pedestrian infrastructure.
Well, hang on,
It's
that's
not.
that's a separate question I have, I want to table that for just a
Well,
moment.
let's go, okay, but that would have been another committee.
But that, hang on, the PIAC was a committee that we established, like we, well, that was.
No, that was.
Yeah, okay, so that was a committee that
Board of Selectmen.
we asked the Board of Selectmen to establish, and then they.
Made the
established it.
recommendation, they established it, and there might have been, was it represented from this
We,
committee?
yes,
Okay.
so we, yeah,
So
we,
yet another committee that we could have or did liaise with.
right,
So,
so technically,
So where are we here on the motion?
so, well, we've got a
that's a good
motion.
question, but we have an amendment on the floor.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we should take off the amendment, so I'd like to withdraw the
You're
amendment.
gonna rescind?
Rescind the amendment.
I'll one second.
So that leaves us with the motion before us, which is to recommend the revised definition as put forth by this committee last year, appended to include the last sentence that's in this draft from rules. That is the motion before us. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
It's a long way.
Do you have anything left? We're on item one.
We're done, right?
We're done with that item.
I would say, observe that there's nothing in the language that I can see that prevented us from creating subcommittees or study groups or other things that we've done in the past. That, if we needed to break out into a smaller subgroup to, because it was something we're concerned about.
As
We,
we
right now, we have a Great Island Committee, we have a waters, you know.
Well, the town has a Great Island.
No, we do here also, we have a subcommittee.
Right.
Of course.
Yeah, look at the agenda today.
Right.
Well, we have.
Their focus areas.
Liaising.
The focus areas, that's what I'm talking about, right?
Right, but no, like in the past, like we have created, here's a subcommittee of 4 people who are gonna tackle one particular topic and explore it in depth and report back to the main committee. We've done that also.
But nothing in this limits how we
Yeah.
live up to those.
And I think that's good that nothing limits that. Because I don't want to have to ask someone permission to create a study group or whatever.
No, there was nothing,
Right.
yeah, there was nothing throughout that prevented any of the, what I view as kind of past practices of the subcommittee continuing. Next item is finance and budget. I have a couple of updates as it relates to ARPA. The first update comes from the Board of Finance meeting August 15th. They did recommend and appropriate $785,000 for the replacement of the DPW floor garage. That is on the ARPA list of projects. For those familiar or not familiar, this is the 5 bays that face the swap shop, not any of the bays that were touched when the renovation was done several years ago. Why is it so much? It includes having to move a bunch of infrastructure, HVAC, garage doors, wiring, fire suppression that's in the floor below it. Other things up to note at that Board of Finance meeting was with regard to Great Island, as of that point in time, $19,000 spent. They point to that as simply a mismatch between the timing of the rentals coming in from the rental properties versus the maintenance expense incurred to date. So I got the sense that was a mismatch between revenues and expenses, a timing mismatch. And then on the ARPA revisions, I do have I can't remember if I distributed it or not, the ARPA updated sheet, okay. I don't know if a new one's come out since there was another Board of Finance meeting, but. That. We got the spreadsheet on ARPA, possible other ARPA projects or items for this committee to think about. I spoke with Ed. He mentioned a couple of projects that he thought could be considered. He has a $1.6 million sewer project that's ready to go. He has phase 2 of the I&I program.
What's that?
That's
That's it.
infiltration.
Flow and infiltration.
Yeah.
What is the N?
I and I.
I&I, okay, that, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay.
Is that the 1.6, is the I-9 1.6 million, or the second?
No, the second project. I may have more on that, give me a moment to check that out, but those are the two headlines.
We're running out of time, aren't we, on?
Well, I think.
Yeah, whatever they're gonna do, they gotta get moving.
You gotta get moving on, as of a week or two ago, there wasn't another, ARPA committee meeting scheduled, I don't know if there is one now, but.
I think they're having one later on this month.
Right, but as of 2 weeks ago, it hadn't been scheduled, and I was having these conversations. So, I'd like to think these two projects will find their way on there. I'm of the opinion that projects that qualify should be added to the list, even if they exceed the 6 million. Who knows which projects are gonna get delayed, stalled, et cetera. So, committee feel any compunction?
Wasn't there an end date for when the projects have to be finished?
That's what we're saying.
But I thought there was.
They had to be committed.
There's
Right.
two deadlines,
Yeah,
actually.
one was the committed and then the other one was the finish line, right?
Completed, yep.
Right, so.
So, but the other project, other item is the sweeper. And so I came away with the impression that he was gonna be advocating for these three projects, the sweeper and these two. I will follow up with him.
What's the cost of the sweeper project?
380.
So that's the update on.
It's a substantial purchase, there's no question. $380,000, I'll take it.
So I was stuck behind it 2 weeks ago, and I thought of you guys, and I took a picture.
That makes disaster sweep.
But it was sweeping.
So this is a combined meeting on.
How many sweepers do
Just
Drainage,
It takes forever
it's coming up,
to like
next Monday.
So like after.
9/11.
On 9/11.
That's the Tilly Pond.
Yeah, the Tilly Pond and all of that. Is that any ARPA in there?
No, the only ARPA money that's been
Plan, design.
appropriated is for a
sewers. Yeah, because
specific
they get all.
design for the system, if you will, that they want to put in.
Yeah, both that one and salt lines.
Correct.
That was done,
$250,000 each.
right? That would,
And so they'll use.
recommended by
ARPA money for
ARPA,
that.
sent the board of finance.
That ARPA money will be used for that purpose.
Yeah, okay.
But they were both in there for $1 million or over $1 million.
Yeah,
And so they've both been cut down to $250,000 each.
For the design work.
For the design work, because they felt the other phases of the project could not be completed in time.
Committed or completed. Yeah.
Whatever.
What's the completion date? Let me know that.
2026, December 31st.
That's the question.
Hmm?
That's the question.
Next Next topic, roads, sidewalks, and pedestrian infrastructure advisory committee. With regard to sidewalks. I got a bit of an update from Ed with regard to, so let's go over what he shared as the updates, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. So, the approach was that areas that were recommended by the initial report were focused on, particularly around schools. Homeschool sidewalk on Hoyt took 2 years to finish, but it is finished. So there's an upgrade that was done there. That was on the list, I believe. Tokenique north side of the street to the, from the school to the Norwalk line, I believe. Well, that's complete. I don't know if that was an
Yeah.
upgrade or new.
It's been completed.
Yep.
As well as connecting from that.
Well, let me go through them all, and then let's, because there's about 9 here.
Got it.
Old Kings Highway South, I-95. Was delayed, took 4 years, but did get done. Let's see others here. The rest of some of these are upgrades. Middlesex was upgraded to concrete. I've been on that one, it's nice. Let's see, Royal, near McLaren was a rehab, not new, but a rehab. Locust Hill, Delafield, there was a gap that was filled in. Others that weren't explicitly mentioned in the PIAC report that have been picked up are West Avenue and Norotan. There was a gap that's been filled in. I've walked that one. Post 53, the sidewalk up the ramp. I sorely missed that one when I used to commute. That was always a bad area to walk. They're adding, or have added, let me see, Norotan Railroad to Heights Road. Railroad to Heights Road. That's been added. Oh, it's being done. It's being, this season it's being done. I think they were waiting for the road to be finished there. An overarching.
Avenue to Heights Road.
Norotan
Okay.
Railroad.
Norotan
Norotan Railroad.
Station Tides Road.
Yeah.
And that's all the.
That was in front of it.
Yeah, maybe it's like where it goes up to Hollow Tree.
Well, it says this one, that's being done currently.
Mhm.
So there is a sidewalk there.
There's a sidewalk
Yeah, I know he's
This
also.
is on the other side.
Are
Is
they
it on the
talking
other side
about
where the construction
Yeah,
is?
I mean, that will have to,
there. Waived, yeah.
yeah.
Well, I got the sense it's in progress, because the idea is, the concept that described is to connect for the new sidewalk that comes down behind Post 53, to connect behind the parking spaces through the Norotan Heights parking lot,
Wow.
south side.
Right, up
Up to Hollow Tree,
Right.
and then down.
Circulate back.
Yes, and what he said to me was that it is being done, it is being done. Didn't say week or month, but it's being done, it's
in there.
Yep. Some of the projects got delayed because of COVID. Norotan to West, for example, was one that got delayed. Talked a little bit about the completion of the, what I call the Norotan intersection.
Where does that stand?
Norotan West
Because
Avenue.
I keep thinking, I keep driving by and thinking, oh, it's gonna be done, it's gonna be done.
I think it is almost completely done. The only thing I've noticed that's not done is the arrow turn
Yeah.
light.
Yeah, I actually think I insulted Ed, and I apologize for this, but I asked a version of that question, not as nice as you did. I said, and he pointed out that it is substantially done. The 2 left turn lanes, which happen to be two directions I don't usually go, I go north-south, are making a big difference. The traffic study pointed to those being as where the real need was. So it's substantially complete, is what I understand. extension, what's this one, Ledge Road? Ledge Road is up next, Ledge Road.
Ledge Road.
Oh, Ledge
From
Road,
Whole Foods all the way down to Norotan Avenue.
Down.
Yeah.
And that gets all backed up all the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
The delay there, and there's still an issue.
Sidewalk or road?
Sidewalk, we're all talking sidewalks here, okay? And again, I've got all this, I can just, the delay there has to do with the state is not allowing the town to use the portion of the property by their little restaurant there.
Mhm.
And so,
They're not allowing?
yeah, it's town property, it's state.
State.
So
The
why does that
restaurant's on
create-
state property?
No, not the restaurant, we're talking about near the road.
Yeah, I think.
There's a strip,
We're talking about
apparently.
maybe, whatever, 6 or 10 feet, something like that, off the curb.
Right.
But why does that create traffic?
No, we're talking about sidewalks. Still talking about sidewalks.
Oh, okay.
But that's what the holdup has been on that particular one.
Sorry, so you're talking about the parking lot in front of Jake's Place?
A portion of that apparently,
Mhm.
Belongs to the state.
Oh,
yes,
so we can't put a sidewalk there.
well, they're holding it up.
Okay.
Yep.
But there's also a
Now,
whole
don't know
project.
if the holdup
that's-
is because they've just not gotten to it, or if they're objecting. I don't want to read more into it than you can't just put a sidewalk on,
But there's an approval needed that we don't have.
yes.
Right, but there's a whole project talking about the roads, okay, with that, at that intersection,
Yes.
where Ledge meets Norotan,
Presumably, that would hold.
and that's a state project. I mean, they're certainly involved, that's for sure.
Right.
So that might be related to the sidewalks as well, I would think,
I would think so.
right?
Yeah, I think you need the state to kind of support the whole.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing. And then the final one we talked about as it relates to sidewalks is the obvious one over there at Edgerton. If you've been on Edgerton, the top of Edgerton has been widened and smoothed, and it's pretty continuous until you get to the bottom of Edgerton, and then it just ends. And on that,
Bottom being near west.
Between
Heights.
west and-
Further, between
West.
west and Heights.
And Heights,
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
or north.
west, just north of west is where it ends.
Yeah, there's no-
Edgerton goes all the way down to Heights
There's-
Road.
Heights Road.
Right,
The
but
road does, but this.
and the sidewalk goes all the way down from west to Heights. There's sidewalk, at least one side,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
both
on the right-hand
sides.
side is your good side.
But the sidewalk ends north of west until picks up like, 3 houses up, 5 houses up.
On Edgerton.
On Edgerton.
Mm.
So there's a gap.
So you come down Edgerton, and I know this, I walk my dog, and then you walk on the street, the last 2, 3, 4 houses. And so the issue there is, there's not enough space, you're gonna have to, eat into the right of way the town has.
Mm.
Could be on the left, could be on the right. Somebody needs to champion which way to go. Which is the right way to go. You can't take 3 and 3.
Yeah, I don't think that
Would
works
it just
very well.
connect with what the already existing?
Yeah, but wouldn't we want to connect with what sidewalk does?
Yeah, are you
There's like an
saying
obvious
that-
answer.
You have the choice to go on the
No,
opposite side
well-
of the street? Because that doesn't make any sense.
Why put the sidewalk?
Well, then you're
That's
gonna
how the sidewalk
impose,
is by my
Well,
house.
I think the issue
What's
is
the
then you're
problem?
imposing on those houses, we're taking however many feet of into our easement
Right.
for your sidewalk.
yes, we are.
Or you just walk on the street for a few.
Like, my whole,
Right.
I've been in town a long time.
Okay.
So, but that's what the holdup is there, is, getting those easements, getting those easements is apparently been the issue. Not taking them, we're telling,
Easement, yeah, not a eminent domain or anything like that.
yep,
Asking.
yep,
Would you please consider?
yes. On crosswalks, many of the crosswalks in the report have not been acted upon, you all know that. Many of the sidewalks, when they were put in, now have the new safety, what are they called, tactile warning and ramps, and I have seen those. But they kind of go, some of them to nowhere, there's no crosswalk. Some of them do have crosswalks. To get the sidewalks in, it's not just the Public Works deciding to put them in because they were in the report. They do consult with the police department's traffic safety, and they will have input. His understanding was that the town had not been pursuing the sidewalk, or the crosswalks, all that aggressively so far. And so some have been done, but he acknowledges not many of the crosswalks have been. But where it made sense, while they were doing the sidewalks, they did put the tactile warnings and the ramps. That is what it is. And then on bike paths, there is a plan, and I will circulate it, that is more robust. Do you have it? I have it. I have 2 copies, but basically what it is, yeah, that's it. It's a more robust plan than what was planned or recommended in the PIAC report, in that it contemplates a contiguous path connecting with a path in New Canaan, bike loop. The plan, has been put together. The town is asking for $600,000 from the state. It hasn't been ruled out. And so rather than start on some of the individual recommendations of smaller independent recommendations for bike paths, what's being pursued is this idea of this comprehensive loop, and waiting to see what, if any, state money materializes.
And what would this look like?
Here,
No, well, sorry. No,
a-
not on a map, but like, what would it physically look like? Okay, we're gonna
there'd
have
be a lane, I would assume, on the right-hand side, or the left, depending on, I guess, the,
Should I have to widen the road to put the lane in, or?
Yeah,
if
what
it's
Ed,
if it's not wide enough now, yeah, that would be involved.
what Ed pointed me to as an example of what he thinks we're trying to avoid, perhaps, is in Stamford, they do have bike lanes. I've been to the one on Hope Street.
Yeah.
I would never.
Yeah. Not much of a lane.
It's a-
literally in the middle of the road.
They painted something. in the road.
Yeah.
So there's certain instances where you go from the right to make a left-hand turn, you cross through the bike lane.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not saying that's good or bad, that seems odd to me. But anyway, pursuing the bike paths has kind of taken a backseat to this more comprehensive collaboration with
New
New
Canaan.
Canaan,
State.
integration, I'll say, with New Canaan, and trying to get some state funding.
To do what, though?
It's a bike route, if you look at it, it looks to me
Right,
more
And
like.
there's a fair amount of signage involved in it, in terms of because it's enumerated in terms of what the money is for in the
Mhm.
document, cost estimate.
I mean, it doesn't sound like it would cost $600,000.
No. When you look
Well, it's
at-
interesting because.
I know I'm missing something. I mean, paint isn't that
You're
expensive.
just missing.
First they have to
Well, they're doing different
Study.
things every.
There's a study.
Oh, there's signage.
Then some paint.
Make sure people want.
But you don't just throw lines down, you have to move all the existing lines as soon as you start putting a 3 or.
Yeah, because you have to make the space.
But some of those streets
Depends on
don't
the
have
road.
lines at all, right? Like Hollow Tree, I was looking at the map, like Hollow Tree doesn't have lines. Right, and then you come down Mansfield, maybe? There's no
Well,
lines.
I'll circulate this, there's a per linear foot breakout.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
what's
saw
being
that,
done, yeah.
I was looking at that, I thought it
I'm
was
not
interesting.
gonna, hey, I'm not one to
I know.
second guess what,
So, I'm just curious what it looks like, and part of me is, part of this is just personal interest, because I happen to bike that path. I don't know that I'm gonna feel safer. You know, so something that New Canaan has that I think is really interesting, because I bike up there sometimes, is they have, and this is like in northern New Canaan, they have signs that say, street signs on the side of the road that say 3 feet. And I think that's really helpful, because just from biking, I know that people sometimes get pretty close to you. And I think if they're constantly reminded that you're supposed to give the biker 3 feet, it might be better than putting some lines down.
Got it. So, and I have seen those signs,
Yeah,
and no lines, just a
yeah,
reminder.
I think it works.
Yeah, if bikes go wherever they want anyway, why do you have to put a special line on the road for it? It's not like you can't go on another
Right,
road.
and I don't know that I
See what I'm
would,
saying?
I don't know that I would observe those lines.
That's what I'm
right?
saying.
I just, because, you know,
Bikes can go wherever they want.
right,
on the road.
it's,
Well-
when you're biking, it's probably more dangerous to stay within, when you're going faster, it's probably harder to stay within 3 feet.
Well, it might give you a false sense of security when people are turning right
Right.
through your lane anyway.
So the overview on the bike paths is that generally, the recommendations are on hold as this plan was
Well, that's
devised,
good.
We're gonna do
estimated,
nothing,
Yeah,
and we're pursuing a larger goal.
sounds great.
where perhaps some matching money might be available, and then take it from there.
I
And
think
then,
the state's gonna have trouble.
So did you get this from,
The grant for Darien and New Canaan to do a bike path, and the schools are funding it.
so did you get this from Ed? Okay. Did he say how long that this has been initiated and or lying inactive?
well, not inactive, it's being, somebody
Pending,
put all
how's
this
that?
together. I took it as a lot of work went into putting this together.
Yeah.
I'll press for that.
From my experience, basically,
Yeah, take it, man.
good wives, you're taking your life and put yourself at huge risk there. Find that winding way,
I was just gonna say, there are parts of Good Wives River Road that,
they're just blind corners.
well,
I won't be doing it.
And then the last
No guts,
item
no
I'll
glory.
touch on. The last time I'll touch on is, at our last meeting, someone asked about Talmadge Hill. I don't remember if it was you, Frank, or someone else. It comes up.
Sidewalk sites, so we're on the station at the north end of Boise.
Right, and so revisited some of the history here on that. And at one point, the DOT looked into it, and it didn't progress with the DOT. Previous administrations have looked at this and have held off. I understand that at some point, New Canaan indicated that they're not moving forward with their end of the sidewalks. And that, so if Darien did something, it would just end at the Darien line. But the biggest
reason
obstacle,
is not extending is because we're not doing it.
and then the one I remember, because I walked that site, is seeing that there were walls, there was property, and that it was gonna require easements, and that at least some of the neighbors were not being, or were being cooperative. None of those impediments have changed. And so, you know,
Right.
sort of at an impasse as to how to fix some of these.
Right, so it's an impasse if we let it be an impasse, right? It's fine with people who own the stone walls if the commuters walk in the street, because they always have walked on the street, and the people with the stone walls that are technically constructed inside the right of way don't want to admit that they built a stone wall in the right of way, or they bought a house with a stone wall in the right of way. So we as a town have not wanted to confront that because it's politically unpopular. However, we have people walking in the street in the snow and the slush at night, or after the sun goes down when they're going home from work. Which I think remains as unacceptable now as it was a dozen years ago. So what you're telling me is that the scope of the administrative action we can take has been reached, and that if citizens want those sidewalks constructed, they'll have to resort to more overt political action, like come on out and ask for the sidewalks. Right, because the people who are administering this process are saying we're at an impasse.
That sounds-
Seems to be, we're at an impasse.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but
See,
I think the town is too hard.
Yeah, so this is above our degree of difficulty. We're not able to do this until someone makes us do it. Right, so make us do it.
so those are the updates on the 4 topics. And so with that update, my takeaway was that an attempt has been made, certainly as it relates to many of the sidewalks. It's a work in process. If we wanted, my thought is that if there was a desire to review what's been done, what's on the list, and to refresh or make recommendations, I guess this isn't the PIAC committee. This isn't the PIAC, this is just Public Works. But if there was a desire to review what's been there
Yes.
and there's a view on recommendations on things that could come off the list, things that should be revisited given what's been done, changes in development, which have certainly occurred since that plan was put together, that might make some sense. As it relates to sidewalks on the bike path, you heard the update there. And then on the crosswalks, probably be looked at the same way. Is there, given the new sidewalks that are in the usage and the developments, are there certain ones that maybe kind of rise to the top that weren't at the top before that warrant a second look? And then as it relates to Talmadge Hill, don't know if usage there has changed. I don't use Talmadge Hill, so I don't know. But is the commuters you're talking about, are there a lot of commuters? Are there a lot of folks walking on the
When
street?
we talked about this pre-pandemic, there were in the dozens of commuters per day. So all around, they put it at 100. I don't have
week?
a hard date on that. I mean, Talmadge Hill is one of the lesser served stations in the network.
Yep.
And clearly some of the folks who get off Talmadge Hill walk north into New Canaan, and some of the ones who walk south into Darien. But in the dozens to 100 people are using that station and walking, using the station and not driving there.
Right, okay.
And some of those are residents, some of them are workers at the Woodway Country Club. There's a range of people who are.
Well, yeah, obviously there's some impediments here, but maybe a study of just how many people are using it. Now, no one's using it right now because of the buses running. We're gonna touch on that.
Well,
That's coming back on, it's coming,
yeah,
it's
they're back in service.
Yeah, that's, yeah, we're gonna touch on that. So, my thought would be, if this committee thought about, there was reason to revisit and make some recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, when Ed first came at the beginning of the year, I think we asked about this and made some recommendations, and I don't know how his list gets done, and he
No,
prioritizes it.
the committee didn't make any recommendations.
Oh.
That was a conversation. If the committee made recommendations, it would be a formal.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, I think we should absolutely revisit it.
Are you talking about all the sidewalks? Or
Sidewalks,
just
yeah.
Talmadge Hill right now?
No, we're talking about
Sidewalk.
the sidewalks.
Yeah,
Basically, the recommendations of the PIAC overall.
So just
But
to
the-
refresh the history, right, when we formed the PIAC, right, this group, Public Works Committee, recommended to the Board of Selectmen that they form the PIAC. And the PIAC, they did actually was formed by the Board of Selectmen, and then we as a group, and me as an individual, were tasked with staffing it, right? So I would assume that if we decide to refresh this process, that will follow that same process. That we will recommend to the Board of Selectmen that they create a PIAC2 to revisit and update the work of the original PIAC. That if they do that, then they will turn to us and say, okay, you guys find people to do the work.
And how did that go way back in the day?
So we as a committee, largely I interviewed a bunch of people, and we put out, I mean, it was, there used to be a newspaper that was functional in the town.
So you
But,
put a notice out or
they put-
something?
Put an article in the paper.
Okay.
We reached out to, you know, it became known through the organs of the town.
That this was
Wanted
being
this to
done?
happen. Yeah, we had
Okay.
a couple people ex officio from this group.
Okay.
We had one or two people who were also interested in other parts of the RTM. And
Okay.
then we had a bunch of citizens who just stepped forward and said.
Step forward and said, I'll help.
Yeah, count me in, yeah.
How long was the committee?
That committee
Active?
was active
It was a while.
for about 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
So and because the first part of their work was to basically survey every foot of sidewalk in town to identify where they were, what side of the street,
And
what the
that's that
condition
map.
was, and stuff like that. A lot of that work's been done, so yeah, I think it'll be faster, I'm just guessing it'll be faster to review and update. rather
Yes,
than-
Yeah.
I would think so.
But do we need a PIAC, or can we just do that?
It would seem like the first step would be what Frank just mentioned, which
Just
is
update.
review and update,
Yeah,
and then determine,
I mean, we could all
as a
kind of
recommendation for
tackle
a
our
committee to follow up.
districts.
I mean, the original recommendation was for there
Yeah.
to be a committee that kind of I don't want to use the word monitored, but followed up.
Right,
So this committee asked last meeting to find out where things stand. Ed provided a bit of an update. He does track not just these projects that are incremental that were on the PIAC list. He tracks them alongside his ongoing maintenance program of the entire sidewalk stock. He tracks which ones have been upgraded from asphalt to concrete. So he's got a
So
pretty,
he's getting-
and it's a matrix actually that I think he inherited from Bob Steger, his predecessor, and he's enhanced it. So it is being, in my opinion, methodically tracked. Whether or not individuals agree with the items that are, how they're prioritized is a secondary issue, but they are being tracked, and I think he said a half mile of new sidewalk has been added, maybe more. Let me find that number. Half mile of new sidewalk per the recommendations. Now, how that compares to what was recommended, that's,
Seems unimpressive.
I don't know. Alongside all the maintenance and upgrade.
They definitely upgraded a whole bunch, which
Yes.
has been positive.
Right. And the focus has been
it's positive.
predominant, as you heard me go through that list, is predominantly around the schools and the
Yeah.
commuter, and
Right.
a little bit downtown, but that was that
Well,
Tokenique
that's
area.
what we had.
So
said.
high level.
That's what the PIC had said with the prior research, where's the greatest pedestrian needs?
Right.
Near schools, near downtown.
Right.
And near other transportation hubs, so buses and trains.
Right. So that's the update, where this committee wants to go from there. But I think we could kind of focus on what has been done and what maybe has changed versus what was needed or desired 5, 6 years ago.
Another thought here is now that we have I'll make it fast.
No, I'm just glancing, that wasn't at you.
No.
Otherwise I do
But I
this.
think-
I'm not that subtle.
If we chose to go forward tonight and create and recommend the PIC be reconstituted, right? This would largely be a task that falls to the next Public Works Committee to perform, because here we are in early September,
Mhm.
where we have, what, 1 or 2 more meetings left as this Public Works Committee. But like staffing and liaising with that next, with the PIC would be the next Public Works Committee's job. So unless we think it's really urgent to do, maybe the better part of valor here is to hold fire until after the election, when the next Public Works Committee is constituted, say, in December. Now we're all fully informed about what this is about. If we as a group as individuals are mostly on that next group, we're then prepared to either recommend we go forward or not. But we're not like throwing a pass to someone else to catch, you know what I'm saying?
So, I hear you, Frank, or could this committee, does this committee have an interest in reviewing and forming an opinion as to, helping to inform that group if it gets put together as to what has been done more coherently relative to what was recommended, so that that group can move forward
Yeah.
off a base of what's been done.
I think that's the best direction, personally.
Do we need to know that anyone's listening? on that. So what I mean by this is that
I hope somebody's listening.
one of the recommendations, always, because one of the possibilities was recommending to the Board of Selectmen that they reconstitute PAC 2 in order to, as an update on what happened. Then you've got the town that has said, no, or like, we're fine, and then the Board of Selectmen can either say, yes, go forward, and yeah, let's do this, let's do a time delimited 3-month update on how we're doing on this, so that by, January, February, there's a report out on it, so it's kind of clean and done. But if we decide to go forward and just to do an update on it, we really don't know whether
Yeah, where's that gonna go?
whether that is meaningful or at all in terms of whether it's, I mean, we can do it, which is, we can comment on PIAC and progress and whether we think it's sufficient or good or not, but, and do we need any more endorsement here that it's gonna get any, that it has any weight?
Is there a view that the progress is not being made? Clearly, it's not being made on all fronts, but it's been made on some, not on others. Is there a view that a follow-up committee
Yeah, I think it's.
is necessary?
My opinion is that it's clear that progress has been made in some areas and not at all in others. So there were recommendations on bike paths that for good reasons, no progress has been made since PIAC made its recommendation. PIAC made a recommendation about the Talmadge Hill area, no progress has been made there, activity has happened. So to me, it's really clear that there is clear progress in some areas and clear and not clear progress in others. The question is, in today, in 2023, are those other areas still relevant? You know what I mean? There's kind of a,
I hear
we
you.
move forward 10 years.
It's also an accountability question, like who got to decide
Right.
that there would be extra sidewalks put on Middlesex in certain neighborhoods, and that there would not be a sidewalk put in another neighborhoods, right? I mean,
Right, or who decides like this asphalt gets upgraded to cement, but there's still no sidewalk over here? Like, why are we upgrading something when there's nothing over here? So like questions like that, I have.
On the upgrades.
Yeah, like why would we
when-
upgrade?
There's a cycle for all the existing stock. It's
Oh.
on a cycle for maintenance. And they only get upgraded if they're up for their regular maintenance. In certain areas, they get upgraded. I observed that many of them have to do with areas, when they're upgraded to concrete, I think is really what it is. It's a wider,
I'm sure it's lovely, but there's still
and
many
it's around
areas in
schools.
town that
Yeah,
have
your question,
zero.
why there?
How does that get?
How does that
The
get
emphasis,
priority
the
over
emphasis, I
zero?
came away with, the
Nothing
emphasis is still
Something has been
around
done.
schools, around infrastructure, transportation. I've observed, and the list of upgrades tended to be around those areas, the areas of focus. So you can debate, gee, why Holmes, not Hindley first, or why Holmes and Hindley and not Post Road, is what you're asking. But-
Or anywhere else that has zero.
Right, but the
Yeah.
general overlay was that the areas,
Right, and how
As it relates
far
to
from the
schools and-
school are we talking?
Right.
Is it a block, 2 blocks, 3? What's the,
Oh,
and
something
then
I,
if those are done, what's the next priority?
right, so ultimately the decision responsibility for this falls to the executive branch, which is Ed as the public works administrator and the board of selectmen as the decision people, right?
Right, but then
So-
what do we do?
So-
'Cause-
well,
So I think to get to your point before, I think if we as a RTM group provide our updated input to Ed, then that might be helpful, but we are ultimately a legislative function, right? I think that we would be more effective to have the executive reconstitute the PIAC 2, and so that with the express intent that revised PIAC would be then used to inform their executive decision-making about where to put sidewalks.
well, let me ask this though, because every year, the sidewalks come through the budgeting process, right? The department heads make all their recommendations to the town administrator, who filters them, makes their recommendation to the board of selectmen, who then, and it goes to, we know the process.
Right.
If this body made a recommendation, or maybe not specific recommendations, but even just prioritized or reemphasized in today's environment, where focus should be through the budgetary process? Is that something that's been tried? Or the executive approach via,
See, I
again,
think during the budget process, there would be a particular level of sensitivity to it. So, for instance, roads, we authorize in the budgeting process.
Roads.
6.2 miles, or the amount of money that's gonna get.
$1 million to do.
We don't, and I don't think it would be a welcome commentary for us to say where.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that Ed's
Right.
purview?
It is, but like the PIAC report, the emphasis was on focusing on schools and railroads and
Transportation.
maybe there's room for for an emphasis area, not specifics, because you're right, specifics invites controversy before the process even gets going. That's a simple fact. I'm just thinking out loud here, but you're exactly right. Or is the executive approach of a PIAC?
I just
So-
don't know why that is necessary. I don't know why we can't tackle it as I don't get it.
Well, that's what we're talking about. Got a lot of experience here.
So with
amongst
the,
parties.
with the, getting the PIAC 2.0, whatever, if we are serious about doing that, are we better doing that under the current administration or the next administration? That's somewhat of a hypothetical.
Yeah, my opinion, and that's all it is that if it's identified, if it's an issue, it's the sooner we do something about it, then we should. I don't really think we should defer to someone else. We've spent this amount of time on it now. It's like, I think we should either do something about it or not do something about it, because we've done the work to get to this point. And if that carries over into the next group,
Then cool.
so be it.
Oh, so when I meant in administration, I didn't mean that. Did you interpret it as us?
But it's the same election time.
Yeah.
Yes, but my concern is that it goes to the Board of Selectmen and they, and if this is something we want, is the current group of Board of Selectmen more likely to vote yes for this, or is the next,
I think the way it takes time, whatever we decide is going to transcend administrations, I would think.
Okay.
I don't personally spend too much time focusing on the now, because things in government take
Quite a bit of time.
So that's just one guy's view.
I would propose that there are three options that we've talked about. One is just to drop it, because we've kind of talked about it, and we're like, okay, they're doing their job. The other two are, the other one is a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that they reconstitute the Act 2. And the middle option is us doing a dedicated working session on this and provide our comments back to the full RTM and to the Board of Selectmen and to Ed, as far as the committee's assessment and guidance and input reflection back on 10 years of progress in pedestrian access.
Just to be clear though, that third option you're describing a meeting, you're not describing field work that assesses
Yeah.
the condition of things out in the world.
Yeah. So it's pretty lightweight.
But why couldn't there be some field work?
Would you not have done the field work before you go to the
Yeah, I would
meeting?
think that we would have to.
Right, that's, both of
All right,
us are the
so-
same thing.
The only question I have is are we updating the existing report as to where those various observations lie today? Or are we going back out and into the field, as you say, and relooking at everything that was covered in that report back in the day?
Then we take your proposal of 3.5.
No, but Rolf, I think would have to do both. An honest assessment of what's been done by looking. I mean, we all have probably been amongst us, all of these improvements, but collectively we can't probably. The question last meeting was, what's been done? Well, we all have observed what's been done, but no one's consolidated what's been done. Ed tried to consolidate for me some of it. I think he tried to do all of it.
It sounds like he has the database of where
Mhm,
sidewalks
mhm.
are.
Yeah, I think he's got a lot of
what the
information.
timetable is for renovation. So maybe maybe we want to build on that to say, okay,
Right.
we
Start with
identified
that.
25 gaps in the network last time. How many of those gaps have been filled? Right? I mean, I think that would be an important question. You know, we identified the following 10 dangerous crossing locations without a crosswalk. How many of those have now have crosswalks? Right? I mean, that would support at least the meeting you're talking about to say, okay, we know we've done work, and we know that the sidewalk's been upgraded, we know that this has been a focus point, and we know we've invested X dollars in this. All good, great, but how much of the original need identified has still not yet been met?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, in my mind, that's an update,
Yeah.
okay?
It's commentary on what's happened, it's an update of, it's a reflection back on the PAC one. It's not a declaration that a whole new initiative needs to start. I think that's the place to start, is that if we think this is an important thing to focus on, I think it is, that we do a dedicated session on it and do the preparation for that. And with the objective of coming out with a statement, an update from the RTM Public Works Committee on the status of it, and we report that out to the.
So we would do some field work and,
We're called for.
yeah.
So.
Well,
If we're
I'm gonna
just
stay at it.
reflecting back on what's already done though, that's not really doing anything, because it's done. Like,
But
what's
in
the point?
in doing that, we'll observe where there's the
Yeah, but
gaps.
doesn't Ed already have this in his database? Like, can't he just like do a printout?
No, I think this is kind of like the public, well, we as representatives, because PIAC was actually kind of a more representative. This is, and it was done, PIAC was the voice of the constituents saying, this is where we think it's important to go. They went off and did some stuff. We are representatives, and we're kind of stepping in and filling on, and where those citizens' wishes kind of followed. It gives us the opportunity, you can think about the output as coming out. It's gonna be, yay, let's declare success in all of the great things that have been done in the first section. The middle section is going to say, yeah, but here's still some areas that we said we were gonna do. And the third section is gonna be, and 10 years later, here's where we feel like there are new opportunities for us to have pedestrian access.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I definitely get the sense that Ed doesn't want to stand out there and say, you know, we did this street, and that street. He doesn't want to broadcast what streets he's doing, because then he just gets
Going forward.
bombarded,
Yeah.
you know?
Rightfully so.
So
Totally.
I think we should just bear that in mind, but I think that's why it's us talking publicly instead of him.
yeah. And it might give us an opportunity to voice, it gives us an opportunity to voice some of Ed's kind of agenda, concerns, and vision. It's an opportunity to get him the credit for the stuff that's all gotten done, and at the same time, kind of maintain a level of accountability.
And also probably sprinkle in some reality as to why some are or can't be
Right.
done. Or
Stop making
Yeah.
excuses.
Comments?
okay, so what, is there a motion?
Where are we going?
Yeah. It sounds like a working committee, a working group.
Okay, and can we state for the record or motion what the goal of the working group is, and it's the immediate goal
An assessment
of PIAC from whenever, back in the day?
You articulated it quite nicely. I kind of like
What's been
I thought so, too,
accomplished.
yeah.
what's been
And
accomplished,
what remains still to be addressed. I mean,
And
that
just
in itself is,
that's probably a
that's
place,
plenty to start with.
And other
deficiencies.
that's a place to work from. And on that second part about what remains to be done, it was on the list, so it remains to be done. If there's any input as to whether some are more urgent, if there's some new ones, Ed actually said, are there new items I should be thinking about?
Yeah, great island.
It's not just, is it on the list, is it crossed off, is it still open? But does it still need to be on the list? Are there others that should be here? And are there any that should drop off? Is all part of that second part, in my opinion. I mean, you're out there
Well,
looking.
I think you're expanding the
Well-
scope there.
Well, but we want to keep it static from what we all came up with 10 years ago. Here's the list. This
Well,
remains to be
my only
done.
concern is that we go through an effort and let's say we decide that we want to recommend PAC 2.0,
Mhm.
we go to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen says, "Meh."
Well, then
Okay.
that would be their political decision to reject that, and they're gonna have to live with that. There are plenty of people in town who actually think sidewalks are really important
Okay.
and want this kind of transportation. And the Board of Selectmen has been, once they got over their initial distaste of being told what to do, right, they actually adopted sidewalks and pedestrian infrastructure as a priority for multiple administrations. So I would think that it would be entirely consistent for them to say, thank you, we appreciate your support on sidewalks and infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure. And we look forward to making more progress. I mean, certainly that would be Ed, I think that would be Ed's response at least.
So the working
Yeah, I'm
group
thinking more about
concept
the
of
Board of
what's been
Selectmen.
done, what hasn't been done,
And then
and
input.
then
And
with
then
that
on
as the
priorities.
basis for if there's a decision to make a recommendation to reconstitute, to
Yeah, see,
PX2.
that's what I would like to do, is update where the original report is today, and then go to
Go.
the Board of Selectmen, for argument's sake, update and brief the RTM. Go to the Board of Selectmen, get an input from the RTM, do you think it's worth initiating 2.0?
We didn't ask for the
Okay.
RTM's input last time, we made that decision.
Well, I'm just talking out loud,
Yeah.
okay? But it wouldn't be bad for us to have that knowledge that the RTM is behind it, so to speak, and then go to the Board of Selectmen and say, hey, this is what we've learned, looking back on the original report. We brought the RTM up to date. They think that it's worth going into 2.0 because the town has changed in the last 10 years. And so we'd like to move that forward. Yes or no? Do we have your blessing? That's, I don't know, I don't want to make it sound too simple because.
No, it is, but the starting point is a review of what's been done.
Yes.
And what needs to be done.
Yes.
And that's gonna be a working, in all likelihood, a working group here, and it's the basis for step 2 and 3.
All right, so why don't we, for today's purposes then, agree that we want to have a working session to update what has or has not been accomplished since the original PAC was issued. And then once we get that done, then we can say, okay, where do we want to go from here?
So Mark, when is our next full Public Works Committee meeting?
Sometimes.
October 5.
So do you think that if we constitute a small working group, that meeting, say, once a week, that working group could come up with a report to the Public Works Committee by October 5th of kind of the reflection of where PX stands?
Do those have to be public meetings that are warned?
Technically, yes.
Yes, this would be like a subcommittee of the Public Works
Yeah.
Committee,
Right.
and it's subject to all the same requirements
Yeah.
of any meeting.
That's not that hard,
And
but
how much time do you need to warn meeting? Is it a week or is it less than that at this point?
no,
I think we would, I think
48 hours
we
is.
would, well, that's for a special meeting, but like, I think if we set the committee up.
Oh, then you could just set up
we
the
would
whole
just say, okay,
calendar.
Yeah, here's our schedule.
set a
Yeah.
committee, Here's our schedule of meetings, posted at
That's
town,
it.
at town hall, with the
Yeah.
clerk.
It could be posted either all up front or
So presumably we could have something like 3 meetings.
3
before-
meetings. Establish it today,
Yeah.
every Tuesday going forward for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Right, and then,
Is there, I mean, but yes, it could be done.
Okay, so now we're expanding this to a subcommittee of the Public Works Committee.
right,
Okay.
which I think is the way to get the work done.
I'm just wondering what would happen at those meetings. It sounds like field work to me.
So at those meetings, you might say we might, so first of all, I'll volunteer to be on this subcommittee in case we're looking for volunteers. We might decide at those meetings that by our next meeting, we need to figure out what's going on by North Half train station, right? Or we need to figure out, we need someone to survey the north half of town or something like that. It might involve doing field work.
As I've thought about this over the past weeks, that's exactly what I thought. I would have had mine to go and look at the spots on the list myself, the ones I'm not familiar with, Some of them jump right out at me, I'm familiar with them. It's the ones I'm not familiar with that I struggle with. It's like, all right, well,
Right.
but amongst us, if there's 2 or 3 people on this committee, maybe you don't have to go do field work on 2/3 of the list because you walk this one, he walks his dog on that one, and you ride your bike on that one.
Right.
That's what I would hope happens, and that's gonna leave you with a subset.
Right.
But I don't know how this committee could come up with any sort of view or recommendations without having seen or be aware,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Even if someone came in the room and told us, you still want to go see it. 'Cause you don't know what's, you can't picture what,
You call that a sidewalk?
Maybe send a
Right.
drone.
And that was-
You could send a drone there during the meeting and look at it. That would be.
so. All right, so is there I think we need a motion to form this.
So I'll make a motion that we form a subcommittee of the Public Works Committee to conduct a short series of meetings with the intent of reflecting on the progress made in the time since the PAC report.
And pause there a moment to let Pat catch up. He appreciates you keeping it succinct. While he's
And
typing.
identify potential priorities for future directions. Something like that.
Well, was that broadening the scope?
That certainly is.
I think you were
All
good.
I'm looking to do
I
is
think-
get up to date.
We could expand it later if there's time.
Okay, so it's just fact-based.
What's
Where
been
does it stand?
accomplished, what remains.
What remains?
That's,
Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
all in favor?
All in favor of that motion? Unanimous.
Okay, so we have a subcommittee.
We have a
So now we have to
subcommittee.
appoint people to
Yeah,
that.
I was just gonna say, who's in the subcommittee?
I will volunteer if it pleases the Public Works Committee.
Okay, we have 3 weeks before October 5th. 3 or 4?
3.
3.
So that could be
I
three.
mean, if you
meetings.
include the week of October 5th, okay, you could make it 4.
Right.
If you meet on every, let's say.
It would seem that,
If you meet on every Tuesday or Wednesday.
right, you have 3 meetings. That doesn't mean I can't go and look at some sidewalks I'm curious about
Right.
that no one knew about at the first meeting, and you go check out a couple, and so, yeah, I don't see this as we all hold hands and go look at.
Is there a reason it has to be done by the next meeting, though?
It's the last
I'm
meeting.
just trying to make it a bite-sized.
It's the last meeting before the election.
I'm just trying to make it a bite-sized thing that we can get done
Right.
and deliver as a result.
Gotcha. 'Cause I have interest, but I do not have the time in the next 3 weeks. It's never gonna happen.
I'll volunteer, but I'd like to also ask Mr. Patrick Keene, who was one of the instigators of this whole thing, who's not here tonight, to please make himself known, that he is either part of this or not.
We can name him
I
to
would
the-
prefer that he be part of it since he was the initiator,
We can
but
name him to the committee.
we can name him to the committee without
Sure, this
his,
is not a
without his
volunteer.
cooperation.
Oh, I think this is just overall a 4 or 5 person thing.
Okay, well, right now we have 2.
Right. So if there are a couple of other volunteers at this table, I'm glad to throw in Patrick as well, and if he chooses to either.
I'm looking
Participate or
around,
not, right?
I'm looking around for volunteers.
I'm,
Jeff?
I'll
I'm
I'll
happy
volunteer. I
to.
just
Jeff,
don't know if
Jeff
I
just
can make
volunteered.
three meetings.
Put it in the record, put it in the record.
The one you're there, though, you can make
You
a
don't have
big
the time.
difference.
No.
Eric,
I would
you
love
got your
to.
bicycle.
I'm gonna be in Europe for a
Europe.
week.
Ah,
Very nice.
All right. so,
Vincenzo,
There
hey.
you go. So we've got 4 plus a.
That's a draftee.
Yeah,
Well,
first
and
round
we have-
draft.
We have other,
There are other
members.
absentees
I will
as well.
certainly, I'm willing to help out any way I can. I
Okay.
desperately don't want to do
Thank
another.
Ditto.
Just
If
to
you need
say,
me to walk
you have
something,
a-
let me
to say that
know.
a full
I will
place
walk
doesn't
it
even
up.
describe
yeah,
it, so I
I
think
am also
Yeah.
happy.
you should,
I just never know what my
Alright.
schedule is, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a mess right now.
subject to work schedule.
I will share with the 4 members, I have the area of town between Maroon Heights up to the high school, and about half mile either way.
Okay.
Pretty well covered, or anything you want to know.
So,
What day of the week are you thinking?
you're way beyond any thinking on that.
Well,
But,
Well, if
and
I-
where?
If I can leave it maybe to that committee to decide.
perhaps we as the committee can meet briefly at the conclusion of this meeting, just to have an
formation.
organizing moment.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, okay,
An
because
an organizational meeting, doesn't need to
Okay.
be posted, and then
Because then one of us can get to.
Become the chair.
clerk.
Yeah, we need a chair.
the
we're
chair
gonna
and a clerk, probably.
Someone to take notes.
and another to tell me where I should look. That was my hesitation, I don't know anything about the program, so.
Where to go?
All right, shall we move
All right, let's move on.
Keep moving on the agenda here?
Will be really valuable.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm
Okay.
taking notes. In your description, you got a lot of great stuff from Ed,
And I'm happy to share that
so that'll be.
with the list in front of us.
Great.
This one, this one, this one, this one,
Yeah,
because
yeah, thanks.
I was just, okay, we can do that.
Agenda, sewer commission?
Next, no, I don't have anything on sewer commission. Anyone have sewer commission?
Well, the only thing I would say is that they met this week and they set the new rate. So it is now going to be an increase of $7.06 per 100 cubic feet of water. Or said another way, a 2.62% increase.
That's the
So
commission rate.
Bills will be coming out, I would think, in the next 30 days or so, for those of you who are hooked up to the sewer.
Flushing.
They mentioned that, yeah, they're definitely gonna go after more ARPA money. You know, Ed
Yep.
mentioned $600,000 in that particular meeting.
Okay.
Is that rate increase, is this an annual thing?
Yeah, this happens once a year, you'll get the bill. If you have it in excess of $500 due, you can pay it in 2 different payments, 6 months apart. If it's $500 or less, you'll have to pay a one-time payment.
And is 2.62% typical? Like that's
That's
below inflation at the moment.
Oh, yeah, comparative to where inflation is these days, that's pretty good. The other thing that.
That's very good.
The other thing Ed mentioned was that he met, I think yesterday, with Westcog, because they're supposed to help us try and find funding, and so he's talking with them about funding to help raise or at least upgrade the protection of both the Stony Brook and Nearwater pump stations, okay? Because they're still vulnerable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Where are we up to? We're up to flooding. So, we already mentioned there's the hearing on the Corbin Drainage Project 9/11. Don't forget about that.
Yes.
Drainage
That's
project.
Monday, by the way.
Yes,
No.
yes. Seemed far off when it got postponed, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And boom, it's here Monday.
That's what happens with summer. On drainage, I got 3 quick things. The first one is, at one of our prior meetings, we talked about some flooding over there on 312 Norotan. They've taken a look. They're using the jetter, but their initial look says that there's roots, and they're gonna try to get it cleaned out, that's what's causing the backups during relatively minor downpours. With regard to dams, bridges, and other drainage topics, the dam that was damaged during Irma has some FEMA funding pending, about $1.5 million. It looks like it's about to be worked out or released, and the work on that dam will progress as soon as that money is released.
All right, so you're
Is
talking
that the
about.
Rings End
Yeah,
Bridge
is that the
dam?
Rings End?
Yes,
Okay.
okay.
This is the one that we don't know who owns it.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
Oh, we're gonna fix
We're
it?
gonna fix it.
Gonna
The
fix it.
damage, well, it was leased,
They don't
right,
care.
that
It
was
was
the one that was
leased,
leased.
and the lease has expired
But the damage was caused during the period
of when the lease
the
was.
lease was, so we're
in
marching
effect.
forward and fixing it.
So we are obligated to fix it.
Yes.
I just don't know
We still
who's
don't know.
gonna own it.
And then Norotan Heights drainage, well, this was a week old now. As soon as the New Canaan line reopens, which it has, those cars will no longer be parking there, the temporary parking, and the Norotan Heights drainage project will proceed.
Move forward.
Yeah, so it should be starting, if it hasn't already, imminently. And Old Kings Highway Bridge is done.
Yeah, that was quick.
I went over it the other day, it looks nice.
It held.
Yeah.
It held.
They're still here.
So our man on the street tells us it's good.
Yeah.
And the last item is update on Great Island. I gave a presentation to the Rules Committee. I can gladly send you the text of that. If you'd like to listen to it there and not listen to it for 10 minutes here, that's your prerogative. I'm happy to forward that information to you.
Send us the text.
And I am gonna be giving a similar update, probably the same update, to the full RTM at its next meeting. So if,
Which is Monday the 18th.
yes.
Yes. So yeah,
But-
send us a.
I will send you the text
And who did you present this to, Mark?
to the board of, to the Rules Committee 2 nights ago.
As an aside, I see that the bus tours
Yeah, I
are
was gonna mention
fully
that.
full,
Well, yeah.
and you know, today was the first day.
Within an hour.
Huh? It was
They filled up within the hour.
within the hour?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Bus tour?
hopefully they're gonna have more.
Yeah, so you got a
If I may
bus
make-
tour of Great Island.
If I may make a
Couple
comment
stops.
about Great Island,
How
Yes,
did I
sir.
miss hearing about that?
I listened
I just heard the other
to
day.
the Great Island
Paper?
Committee meeting,
Yeah, man.
and one thing that kind of became somewhat evident in my mind at least,
You can't get
and
on
it was
board.
covered in this Darien
They said 1 or 2 stops.
paper, is that
Wine and cheese.
there are decisions to be made about spending money. And as Ed made the presentations about the various different things that are pending, he said that he would like to get direction from the committee, depending upon what the committee's decision is about the use of those structures in the overall, I guess, plan for the island.
Right.
And to me, that seems to be, shall we say, an obstacle, that there really isn't a comprehensive and clearly vetted plan for what is the overall, gonna be the overall use of the island. And until that exists, I don't know how you're gonna be able to make truly intelligent decisions about spending money on this structure or that structure, et cetera, without knowing where this is all going. And so I would like to see the Great Island, or some subcommittee thereof, focus on that, is, you know, what are we gonna do with this island? What is its purpose? Why does it exist for the town of Darien?
Isn't that the whole point of the commission?
That is.
No, well, I don't know, I
Well-
was led to understand that the immediate charge to the commission is to get it cleaned up
Safe,
and ready
accessible.
for people to start to go on the island,
You-
okay?
you're right about that,
And-
Ralph.
And a long-term plan is not a short-term plan to just get the thing open.
Right, and if you, at that second Great Island Committee meeting, Ed presented, perhaps that's what that article is speaking to.
Yes.
Many projects that have been identified,
Mhm.
repairs that need to be made, remediation that needs to be done.
Yep.
Nothing has been prioritized, you're exactly right, because there's not an overarching strategy or plan in place.
I think that's.
And so that is an impediment, you used the word impediment, it's holding up anything major being pursued as it relates to projects, which buildings to remediate and fix, and which ones to maybe not.
Mhm.
No decisioning has been made, you're exactly right.
But there's diligent maintenance that preserves options. So
That's-
it seems like to me that in the short-term plan, the diligent maintenance bucket
Mhm.
has probably still got quite a bit of stuff in it.
Oh, yeah, there's a
Yes.
lot of things that,
Without
that.
the
And
need
that's what's
for-
being
without
prior-
the need for a long-term plan, because we do have impediments there.
Right, but there's questions arising about whether certain buildings should even
Be worked on.
exist going into the future, okay?
No, there's no decisions being made, though.
I know, but
There's-
You don't wanna do maintenance. on
whether or not
something
you
you're
spend
gonna
money on that
take down.
building is pending on what is its final use in the
Valid
overall
point.
But don't
plan
those
for the island,
buildings
which
have two-year
at this point I
leases at
think
this
really
point?
doesn't exist.
No,
I'm
there's
sorry.
all sorts of
Don't they
buildings.
have 2-year leases?
Yeah.
So
Yes,
there
they
may be
do.
some money that we have to spend just to honor those.
Yes.
There's 90 days out.
There's a really nice maintenance shed, and, you know, so there, it's like, there's various.
There's the whole spectrum.
Yeah, they're varying degrees, yeah. And the other issue that I have in my mind as well is that, yes, there was a planning and zoning application by the town, which was approved to allow the Serenity Stables to operate,
Yeah.
okay? Now, we voted on leases for all the various residential houses. Okay, is there a lease between the town and the stable?
We
There is
didn't
not, because
vote
we would have
on
seen it,
that one.
right? It would come before this body.
I would think so.
It's
I'm sorry?
expired.
Must have expired at this point.
So,
But-
It
are
was
they gonna let,
supposed to
so is
come
the
before
arrangement
the
then
RTM last meeting.
for Serenity Stables to continue as they are without a lease? Is that
I don't
the
remember if it's
plan?
without a lease, but there was an arrangement made. Was there
We
not? Am I
didn't-
making this
yeah.
up? Something-
No, there was an
the
arrangement
town
made,
has a
and
deal
they
with them to.
Took us voting on that off of the
Yeah, there's-
agenda because there was the pending planning and zoning. approval.
Application.
Yeah.
Right, so now there's still a pending
Okay.
lease.
And there's no
So my question
lease.
is,
There's no
Okay.
lease executed yet.
Okay, so now, we held
Parties need to
off
come.
last time because there was no approval for the zoning application existing at that time.
Right.
The approval has now since come through, so my question is, okay, where's the lease?
I would expect we'd have to vote on it
Yeah.
at
Pretty
the
good.
upcoming.
And
RTM.
one of the pieces of feedback at that point was that the lease for a commercial use stable on municipal property is a really much more complicated thing than what we saw at that point in time. So I would imagine, and I have no knowledge whatsoever, the town council is deeply involved in getting all of the, wherefores and hows, kind of tied around the lease, so we're not gonna see that for probably several weeks.
So questions like that, if there are, I've been keeping the questions that have been forwarded to me by this committee and by members of the RTM and the public, and I will be providing,
Are you getting much feedback from the public?
not much.
I will say
Um,
that people that you sent us like a list of the people that are from the town
yeah.
that were elected to be on that, and everyone, I'm super impressed by everyone that has come forward and fully trust their, that you guys will do a
The-
great job.
A couple of folks have extensive experience. I'll
Exactly.
give them that.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, Frank, I've gotten more inquiries on this and more feedback and more recommendations, more ideas than probably any other topic since the first round of flooding back in Superstorm Sandy. So, not as much as I was expecting, but a lot.
But still more than.
A lot.
Your run-of-the-mill.
And so I'm trying to keep it organized and present, not one-offs, but at the right time, present it to the committee. Here's what I've heard, and I'm sure others, I know others are getting input and feedback as well, and go about it in an organized manner. And I appreciate the emails and the suggestions I've gotten from this group in writing, verbally, and at these meetings. I do track them, and they are going to be all submitted. The first two meetings was not the forum to be putting forth questions. The first one was organizational, the second one was informational. But this committee wants to start doing stuff,
That's
especially
awesome.
as it relates to getting this accessible and open.
Kind of want to repeat my.
Can you show me the pipe?
No, then I'm going to lead this DMA, the Darien Men's Association, a discussion on what to do with Great Island. It's going to be an open event among our membership, quite a lot of members. And it's going to go from whether we should, what buildings to eliminate, what buildings to work
Just a
on
free-form
or not.
discussion?
or-
It sounds like it's
Big-
gonna
big-
be.
Big question.
Very
Big-
freeform.
No, yeah, well, no, but, and, the big kind of questions like, what's the priority? Nature or preserving old buildings?
I forwarded you, I sent you an email about the Men's Association is going to have a presentation, I think, the
Yeah, I'm
early part of
leading it.
October.
Yeah, October 19th.
And there's a woman who's coming in to make a presentation about,
Parks and whatever.
yeah, she's
a
been
couple
very
of weeks
involved
before
with
that, yeah, a week or two before
with the
that.
discussion of when you have a landmark property that's been private, but now you're taking it public to become a town use property, what are the things that you should consider, okay? And that'll be recorded and it'll be broadcast on TV 79,
Yeah.
okay?
Very timely.
And TV 79 also, the Men's Association also has those recordings on
Just take it.
YouTube. Okay, so either way, even if you're not in the Men's Association, you can, have a chance to listen to that. It could be interesting and informative, I would think.
Very cool.
It will be. What did you say? Nature or what? What was your other word?
Well,
Or preserve old buildings.
Or preserve old buildings, or
Or both.
Well, did we buy this property for horses or did we buy it for people?
Right.
First question.
Or both.
I mean, that's a good question.
Well, we're starting to spiral here.
Yeah.
A little bit.
All right, any other?
Yeah,
all right.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I
Oh,
will move to adjourn.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
No.
Sorry, was it?
No.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
okay. Now we're gonna run them.